Hey, what's up, guys? It's Timothy here. I'm coming off the back of two Kaladesh pre-releases here, and I thought it would be worth maybe some people's time to go ahead and discuss kind of the things I learned about Kaladesh in those 8 games that I played between those two pre-releases. I will go ahead and say that my record for both pre-releases was 2-2, so I didn't do amazing. I don't think my sealed pool was particularly strong or anything like that, and I'll get into what strong means in this format here in just a second, but I figured I would go ahead and kind of recap how I did and how things went, and just a couple things I learned that will translate over into draft. I am going to give my opinion about sealed here, and I'll just go ahead and get it out of the way. I don't think this sealed format is particularly healthy. I think it is way too bomb-centric, but I'll talk about that here in a second. And just keep in mind that everything I say about sealed doesn't necessarily mean the same thing about draft. So I'm super excited to start drafting this set. I think it's going to be awesome because it is a synergy set. And when you have synergy, build-arounds and things like that, you want to be able to draft cards that work with it. Sometimes in sealed it just doesn't work out. But more about that in a second. So I'm just going to give you kind of 5 things here that I noticed about Kaladesh while playing pre-release. And I do have a small sample size, so don't take my word for, just don't assume everything I'm saying is the absolute end-all, be-all, or anything like that. It's just my opinions based on what I saw, not just my games, but games around me that I noticed too. So let's go ahead and hop into it. First thing I'll mention is the Mythic Rares in this set. Like the big elephants in the room. Obviously, Mythic is Mythic for a reason. Or at least most of the times you would assume that if you open a Mythic Rare that it's really good. But in this set, the Mythics are, like, turned up to 11. They are outrageous. Some of these cards are so strong that they're nearly unbeatable. And I'm saying that from a perspective of sealed because you may just not have the chance to open anything that can combat one of these cards. Some of them are so strong that I imagine 90% of the time you play them, you will win the game. So the first one I'll mention, because it's the one I got to play with, is the Black Gearhulk, Noxious Gearhulk. Card is ridiculous, and I had this in my second pre-release event, and there was a trend that in the games I played Noxious Gearhulk in, I won almost immediately, or at least on a following turn, or maybe 2 turns later. And the games where I didn't draw Noxious Gearhulk, I lost. And, you can't attribute that completely to the Gearhulk, but the card has just such a warping effect on the game that if your opponent doesn't remove it right away, you will win. You absolutely 100% will win. And the same goes for a lot of cards in this format. So I got to play against a lot of these bombs. Unfortunately, didn't open a lot of them myself. But other cards, and I'm going to rattle off a lot of cards. Cataclysmic Gearhulk is ridiculous. It can do so much. For one card, it just does so much, and it can warp the game in your favor from a losing position, which is what you want in your bombs. Obviously, I would be happy opening any of these cards that I'm naming, but, with GP Atlanta around the corner, which I am attending, if I don't open one of these cards and I have to play against cards like this and there are more than 2 or 3 in the format, like, my odds are going down very, very high, like, very quickly. And with 6 packs in the sealed format, there's a good chance that you sit down and every game you sit down in, someone's going to have a big bomb, whereas if you don't open it, like, you got to scrap something together and you may just not be able to beat the competition here. So yeah, Cataclysmic Gearhulk's another one. Noxious Gearhulk. I think the green Gearhulk is very likely one of the strongest bombs in this entire format, stronger than the other 2 formats, because it's hard to compare something to Noxious Gearhulk and Cataclysmic Gearhulk and still think that there's something stronger than that. But I can't see many games where your opponent curves out into a Verdurous Gearhulk and you are able to win that game. It's too much for my 5 mana. It's too much. Obviously, I love to see cards like this in Standard. They make a really healthy, really strong Standard format, but in Limited, they warp the game so much that you can't beat them. Like, obviously, you can have artifact removal, but what happens if you don't have that card right away as the card comes down? You will lose, and you will lose quickly. So Other cards include Angel of Invention. Card is ridiculous. Like, I know when I was reviewing it, I looked at it and I kind of knocked it a little bit, but having played against it, the card just wins if you don't deal with it immediately, which is crazy. Like, even if you look back at other formats, most recent formats, think of cards like Gisela, think of cards like Archangel Avacyn. Like, those were beatable cards. They won most of the games they came down and stuck around, but it at least takes a couple turns for you to win, whereas these Gear Hulks, this Angel of Invention, another one, Sky Sovereign, that card is absolutely insane. These cards win in a matter of just a couple turns, and they come down, they have immediate impact, they have long-lasting impact, they warp the game in favor of either kill it right away or lose to it, which, again, you want that in your bomb. That's what makes a bomb. But the fact that there are so many of them like that, so many cards that single-handedly win the game, is pretty crazy. And it doesn't just extend to the Mythics. I didn't even mention Chandra, Nissa, even to a smaller extent, Dovinban. But that's a lot of Mythics to win the game. And I'm thinking, like, in the average set, there are a lot of Mythics, and there are a lot of good ones, but they normally don't win the game automatically. I'm thinking something like Giralf's Masterpiece. That was a card that would often win the game. It was very strong, but it was beatable. There were ways to deal with it, and obviously there are ways to deal with these creatures in Kaladesh, but they just have such an immediate impact that if you can't deal with them immediately, you're just out of the game. And that kind of worries me going to an $80, $85 GP, where if I just don't open anything in my sealed pool, how can I beat these cards? Sky Sovereign, how do you beat that? If you don't have artifact removal, you're screwed. Like, if you don't have unlicensed disintegration, like, you're not beating the card. It is going to beat you 90% of the time if it comes down on curve. And even later in the game, it has such a strong impact. Part of the reason I think Cataclysmic Gear Hulk is one of the strongest is it can just warp a game in your favor from a losing position, where a lot of these you might be a little bit too far behind for them to matter, but they're just so strong. And a couple of the rares include, I think it's Aetherstorm Rock, the big flyer that gets bigger, taps things down. It's just crazy good. Just crazy good. Confiscation Coup is ridiculous for a regular rare. Like, it's 2-for-1, very hard to interact with, crazy stuff. And it doesn't help that, like, the counter spells are so situational, and, like, the artifact removal is centered in just a certain couple of colors, with green especially. But anyway, that's the elephant in the room for me, is that, when you have a sealed format that requires you to open a bomb in order to compete with other bombs, it makes for a not very healthy sealed format. And it reminds me of Fate Reforged Draft, where you could open up a rare in the set that could win the game on its own if it went unchecked. And there was such a high concentration of those that the games basically boiled down to, do I have my rare before you have your rare? And if you were the person at the table who didn't open one of those rares, and you opened, I don't know, Scroll of the Master, some janky, like, crappy card for your rare, you're already at a disadvantage because you know that everybody else's deck around you is probably stronger than yours. So keep that in mind with Kaladesh. And again, this doesn't necessarily translate to draft, because it is a thing that happens in sealed, where more packs open mean more bombs opened, and it's just how it is with sealed. But I did not particularly enjoy it. I did play against a lot of it. I played against Angel of Invention, the green Gear Hulk. Heck, I played against a guy with turn 1 Mana Vault, and like, what do you do, right? But anyway, that's the first thing I wanted to get off my chest. Second thing here is that this set is built to be synergistic. It's the whole theme of the set is this energy thing, where you have your energy producers and you have your big payoff cards. And of course, I think they designed it really well, where a lot of the cards in the set that require you to use some sort of energy for an effect also give you a little bit of energy to get it going. But what I've noticed is there's a lot more energy consumption there than there is energy creation, unless you have particular cards in your sealed pool. Again, in sealed, you may open up something that wants to spend a lot of energy for some great effect, but you may not have the means of generating that energy. Great example of this, Aetherworks Marble. I opened this in my sealed pool, and you need to get up to 6 energy before it does anything at all. Of course, it does generate a few energy here and there off of your permanents going to the battlefield, but I didn't get to activate it once because I just didn't have the means in my sealed pool to generate energy unless I wanted to lose 6 permanents, and that just didn't happen over the course of a couple games. And, you know, it just, again, leads to this kind of problem where synergistic sets are amazing to draft. They're fantastic because you can build these wonderful archetypes. But when it comes to sealed, you might be SOL because you just didn't open one piece of the puzzle. You have, you know, the peanut butter, but you don't have the jelly, so to speak. That was awful. Sorry I said that. But it's just really hard to make something work. And it boils down to a problem with this. Ends up in almost every sealed format where you might just open a good stuff pool. Like it's some sort of core set or something where the cards don't necessarily work together, but you're just playing the best cards in the 2 colors that you have the strongest cards in. That's what worked out for me. Is I had really strong red both times, but none of my other colors stood out. I didn't really have a lot of bombs to push me in a certain direction, minus that black Gearhulk. I opened some really unplayable rares and some really build around cards that just don't work. Good examples of this include Panharmonicon, which is a fantastic card, but if you just don't open a lot of Fabricate creatures and very few Enter the Battlefield triggers, it's a dead rare. You're not going to play it for just 2 or 3 effects in your pool. Another one is Dynacharge Tower, which triggers off of you casting instants and sorceries, and if you don't, doesn't really do that much. So it's just kind of awkward to make these cards work in a sealed pool where you did not get the other half of the equation to make it work. So synergy is huge. I do look forward to drafting it because you can fix those problems in draft. In sealed, you get what you get, right? If you don't have the other half, there's no making up for it at any point. I'll talk about is the vehicles. Vehicles are great. I really love them. I don't know that they feel magic-y to me, but I do love the way they played out. I like the design of them where they're really strong. It reminds me a lot of Emerge, where you're sacrificing something. Well, in the case of Emerge, you're literally sacrificing something, but you're losing something to gain basically twice as much out of it. And that's kind of how a lot of these cards work, where you're crewing something and you're getting twice as much power off of what you're crewing. So you do have to give something up, but you're getting a lot in return. And I think it played out really well. A lot of the games came down to vehicles winning them, or at least just the presence of the vehicles made it so that you couldn't normally attack and block the way you normally would. And they are very, very strong. I think probably the worst vehicle in this set is Aradara Express, the 8/6 Menace. It is a very powerful card if you can maintain a board presence, but sometimes the crew cost is prohibitive enough that you can't ever activate it. The same goes for the 10/7, but I didn't play with or against that card. Obviously, Sky Sovereign is ridiculous, and if you get it, you'll play it. And that's another huge appeal of the vehicles, is that they're all colorless. So if you open them in sealed, you open them in draft, they're safe first picks that will make your deck nearly every single time. Whereas in a lot of formats, you have to give up on your rare because the colors aren't open and somebody's cutting you off. Not the case with the vehicles. You will play them if you have strong vehicles. The thing is, though, you can't just jam a ton of vehicles in your deck. Because they're really weird. They function as creatures. They kind of function, I know a lot of people say they're like equipment, and that kind of makes sense, but to me they're like enchantments that you animate over time or something like that by giving up some sort of resource. In this case, the resource is your creatures. But an artifact, or I'm sorry, a vehicle-heavy draft deck or sealed pool wants you to have a very high creature count, but the more vehicles you add, the more opportunity cost you're giving away there. So the more vehicles you add, the less slots you have for creatures to activate those vehicles. So my sneaking suspicion here is that 3 vehicles is probably the maximum you want, unless your deck is just like all creature spells and has some sort of vehicle synergies going on, which the pilots are quite good, and I like those cards. But you can't just jam vehicle after vehicle after vehicle into your deck, because if you can't crew them, they're dead cards that don't do anything. The payoff is definitely there, though. Some of the strongest ones I noticed, I got to play with the Cavalier both times. Or is it the Cavalier? I don't remember what it's called. The Mana Rock. And it highlights what is best about certain vehicles. The vehicles that come down and do something, even if you're not able to crew them, are quite good. So the Mana Rock one, the Bizarre Bombat Boat boat thing. I don't know what it's called. It'll be up here in the corner, hopefully. It comes down and draws you a card. So even if it's not able to do anything, at least it gave you that card back, and you're able to make up for it. Obviously, Sky Sovereign. Like, I'm gonna get so sick of Sky Sovereign. I lost really hard to it. I'm very salty. Like, just turn 5 Sky Sovereign, wreck my day. But yeah, the vehicles are very strong. The rares are good, the uncommons are good, and even the commons are good. Like, Skybluff is a fine card. The Renegade Express is really strong for a common. Like, the Crew 2 on it is fantastic. And again, Crew 1, 2 vehicles are amazing. Smuggler's Captain played against it twice, got destroyed by it. It's just that strong. So again, same thing with the Gear Hulks. Like, you need Artifact Destruction. Don't let Artifact Destruction slip by you. It's like if they designed a set that had nothing but flyers in it, and then they put Plummet in the set. Like, Plummet would be a premier card. You would take it every single time. And that's how it goes with Artifact Destruction. And even, like, the Artifact Destruction isn't great. Like, Demolish, Creep and Mold, those aren't good cards. Like, you'll play them sometimes, but it's not what you want. Appetite for the Unnatural is pretty good. Fragmentize is pretty good. And I think the little gremlin, I don't know his name, but the one that sacks for 3 mana to destroy an artifact, I think that's a fine card too. But that's like what you get for Artifact Destruction. That's not amazing. It's really not. None of those are premier cards that we need in order to combat these huge Gear Hulks and vehicles and stuff like that. So take Artifact Destruction if you have it, and just keep in mind in Sealed, if you don't have Artifact Destruction, you're screwed. You're going to lose. Well, maybe not lose, but you are going to have a hard time fighting a lot of these bombs. Number 4, the vehicles, or I'm sorry, not the vehicles, the combat tricks. We just talked about vehicles. The combat tricks in this set are good, and they are cheap. We're not talking about your 4 mana flash enchantments that give first strike or anything like that. They are all super cheap, and they give you a huge boost for what you're paying for them. First thing you have to point out is that every single color, except for black, has a 1 mana instant speed kind of combat trick. In white, you get Built to Last, which is quite good. +2/+2 is kind of the norm for a 1 mana combat trick, but given indestructible to an artifact on top of that is going to help you win combat, and that's kind of the theme of these combat tricks, is that you are trading up on them. 1 mana to make your creature survive and also hopefully win a combat is quite good. The blue one, I don't know what it's called, but something Inspection. It bounces a tapped creature and you get to scry 1. That's fine. It's a little bit awkward because you can't really use it as a tempo card if you're trying to attack in a lot. Or at least sometimes it's going to be a little bit clunky. But it is a 1 mana thing, so if your opponent has 1 blue, you have to consider the fact that maybe they have this up. The green one, I think, is especially strong. It's Blossom and Shields, maybe? Blossom and something. But 1 green for +2/+2 and hexproof is insane, in my opinion. Like, Ranger's Guile is already a perfectly playable limited card, but giving it +2/+2 for a single green and blanking a removal spell, in my opinion, is just, like, crazy. So watch out for that 1 green mana open. It will get you. The red one is super strong. Built to Smash is 1 red, give an attacking creature +3/+3 and trample. That is huge. Like, what? +3/+3. So you are going to win that combat. You are going to trample over. I'm sorry, I think the creature has to be an artifact to get trample. Correct me if I'm wrong. Am I wrong? I don't know. I'll double check before I put this video up. But and I said black didn't have a 1 mana spell, but it has 2 mana spells that are both quite good. The first one, I can't remember its name, but it gives +1/+0, lifelink, and indestructible. So you're going to win that combat. You're going to kill something, and your creature survives with lifelink, giving you a huge life swing. That's stupid. Like, it's just going to get you. They say the second trick wins, but if there's no second trick, then that's just a huge swing in the favor of whoever cast that card. And the other one is, I believe, Subtle Strike. For 1 in a black, you give a creature -1/-1, and or you put a 1/1 counter on target creature, which is huge. Borrowed Malevolence was a great card in Shadows or Eldritch Moon. I was super impressed with it, and this card is just that all the time, like Entwined or escalated. Like, you just get both effects if you need it. It can be creature removal. You can use it to win a combat. You can pump one of your creatures. Like, it's just fantastic for two mana. And all of these cards are instant speed, obviously. There are a couple others, but obviously sorcery speed pumps and combat tricks. No, they're not even tricks, they're sorcery. But these pumps, they're not as good as the instant speed ones. And I think all of the instant speed ones are good. So, thing I'm getting at here is if you're in a sealed pool or maybe even in a draft and you are just not getting good removal, maybe someone's sniping all the good red removal, which does have good removal, try to use your combat tricks as pseudo removal. If you can't kill creatures straight out, try to engineer a combat where your opponent's forced to block, or maybe they make blocks that look favorable, and then use your really aggressive, your really efficiently costed removal spells or pump spells, combat tricks, to win that combat for you. So try to use them in a way that you'll be able to trade off your opponent's creatures for your combat tricks, because trading your 1 mana instants for your opponent's like 3 drops and 4 drops is quite good. That is a good recipe to win limited games. And then number 5, I just wanted to mention this. It's not as big as some of the other things on this list that I've already mentioned, but there are a lot of hasty creatures in this format. So creatures with haste, and majority of them have 3 power. So they're across all rarities. There's some rare ones with haste. The one that comes to mind right now is the Hellion, which I think is a very strong card, and I would be looking to play it. I think it is a first pickable rare. At uncommon, you have a couple artifacts and red cards that have haste. Brazen Scourge comes to mind. It's 2 red and 1 for a 3/3 haste, which if you play on curve is definitely going to get in there and then do a little bit more after that, demanding some sort of trade or just pressuring your opponent by a lot. There's a Thopter, I can't remember its full name, but it's 4 mana for a 3/2 fly and haste creature, and that goes in any deck. Like, that's just a limited all-star uncommon. Like, a 3/2 flyer for 4 is already good, but when there's no color restriction on it and it gains haste, that's really strong. So I think that card's great, even though I didn't see it come up in any of my games. There is a Fabricate creature that is a 2/2, I believe, for 4 mana with Fabricate 1. Oftentimes you'll probably put the counter on that creature because it does have haste, so you want to swing in for 3 damage right away rather than just pay a 4 mana 2/2 and have that 1/1 sitting back. So just keep that in mind. It's, again, a colorless creature. It goes in any deck. And then you have a couple other ones floating around as well. One card I will point out in particular, because I think it's a lot stronger than maybe I anticipated. I got to play it in both of my sealed pools, and I played against it a little bit too, is Spontaneous Artist. It's a 3/3 for 3 and a red. It comes down, it gives you an energy counter, and at any point you can pay an energy counter to give a creature haste. Normally, an effect like this would read something like red mana, give a creature haste. And those effects aren't really amazing because sometimes if you're trying to curve out in these red decks especially, you don't have open mana. You're constantly tapping all your mana, so you don't really have the mana up to give a creature haste. But Spontaneous Artist lets you use all that stored up energy to just give any creature you play for the rest of the game haste, and it does not require mana to activate that ability. So you can tap out and still, tap out for your creatures on curve and then give them haste with Spontaneous Artist. I think it's a really strong card, and the failsafe is just that it's a hill giant, which is okay. He can give himself haste too with that energy counter, so I think it's a really strong card. But anyway, the point of talking about hasty creatures, and I didn't mention some of the artifacts. There's a 2/1 pilot with haste. There's a couple vehicles with haste, Oval Chase, and the 5/3 rare one. I can't remember its name off the top of my head. But the point about talking about the hasty creatures is that this speeds the format up, and it requires you to think about what your opponent could have. We've all been in those situations where you're trying to swing in and close a game out, and you're just racing with each other, and sometimes you have to make an attack where you have to think to yourself, all right, if I make this attack, I might win the game on my next turn, but if my opponent has a hasty creature, I'm dead. So keep that in mind. There are a lot of hasty creatures. They can be in any colors. They're concentrated in red. Obviously, that's kind of the color for haste, but there are colorless ones too that are just playable in pretty much any deck. So really, really strong. I think red is probably one of the premier colors here. Obviously, I got to play it twice, so maybe I can't make that statement quite yet, but as far as sealed goes, I was very impressed with the red cards across all of the rarities. With that being said, I thank you guys for watching. I hope maybe you enjoyed your pre-releases a little bit more than I did. I'm not going to say I didn't enjoy them. I still love playing with new cards. But, when you lose to something like this, it just does not feel good at all. It's just a very crushing defeat. But yeah, I hope that draft is as fun as it looks. I hope that there are just some wacky decks out there that people can play with the cards that have been provided for us. I think I love the design of the set as far as you know, the aesthetics go, as far as like the synergies between cards go. But it's just not there and sealed for me, or at least it wasn't. I'm sure for some people you got the busted pool where you have everything that works together, but I just didn't get to open that, and it worries me going to a GP, spending that money on a main event where you know that if you just open garbage, that it's really hard to compete. So hopefully no Midnight Oils, no Lost Legacies, anything like that at GP Atlanta. But anyway, thanks again for watching, guys. I hope you really enjoyed your pre-release. I hope that you enjoyed drafting. I'm really looking forward to it, and I love hearing about stories about how your pre-releases went. So again, thanks for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. My name's Timothy, and I will see you guys next time.